Welcome to SHOWstudio. It's our last panel of the couture season, but what a collection to be talking about, because we're going to be talking about Maison Margiela Artisanal, their amazing couture collection, and obviously sort of what John Galliano is doing there is, I think, throws up so many different things to discuss, and it's always amazing to look back at the work he's done in the past and equate it to what he's doing now, but I think the way he's sort of reinterpreted the spirit of Margiela is something that's very, very interesting. But before we kind of dive into all of our discussions, I'll let my amazing set of panellists, I think the most colourful panel that we've ever had, it's just so amazing, introduce themselves. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Natalie Gibson and I teach at St Martin's Fashion with Print.
Hello, I'm Hettie Judith and I'm a writer specialising in art and occasionally fashion.
Hi, I'm Dilara Findikoglu. I'm a fashion designer taught by Natalie Gibson.
Oh, good. Hello, I'm Judith Watt. I'm a pathway leader, BA Fashion Journalism at Central St Martin's.
So I'm gonna big question as the first point I'd like to discuss. What do we think of what Galliano is doing at Margiela? Because we're a few seasons in now. I think the excitement of the appointment has kind of tempered. People are actually focusing more on the clothes and less on the kind of the story of the appointment. Do we like what's happening there? Judith, what's your take? Because you're a big Galliano fan.
Well, yes, I am a Galliano fan. That's absolutely true. What do I think of it? I think he's eased into it extremely well. And the last season, not talking couture, but the one, you know what I mean?
The ready-to-wear.
Exactly. Sorry, lost my brain there. The ready-to-wear, I really like, and it's much more him, and he's much more at ease, I think, with designing for Margiela. Mm-hmm. And I think it's become a very seamless, for want of a better word, transition. So he seems happier, and he's good, and he's sitting with the DNA of the house, which is an expression I hate, but there's a degree of expression that self-expression that he's coming out with. And the key buzzwords that he's talking about are things like, authenticity at the moment, which he's mentioned again in that press release. And yeah, there is an authenticity in his work now, which is, I think, is really refreshing. Much more natural, much more natural than that dreadful straitjacket he had to wear at Dior.
Yeah. But do you not think that there are elements of what he did at Dior and things that he enjoyed exploring? Things like, and again they are mentioned in the show notes for today, things like the banal or the things that would typically be discarded or overlooked, and things that he did enjoy. I always think of that newspaper print, things that were kind of typically not seen as beautiful, that he enjoyed kind of...
Yes, but the thing is, that's referencing history. It's Schiaparelli.
Yeah.
Elsa Schiaparelli, I should say. So that's why it's, everyone said, we can't believe he's at Margiela, it's not going to work. Well, actually, Margiela has those references and interests as well. So it's a much happier fit. Is what I love the work that he did at Dior. I think some of it showed a great deal of strain, but some of it was absolutely bloody marvellous. But this is more him. That's what I think, anyway.
What's your take?
I was just about to kind of mention is I've been writing quite a lot about Dadaism this year because it's the centenary of the Dada movement, and one of the things that I was asked to do was draw on different aspects of popular culture that showed the kind of Dada sensibility in our own time. And Margiela, the artisanal collections for Margiela are obviously one of the main things, and this idea that you take the banal, the abject, and create something that's artwork or something that's precious out of it. And in fact, if you go back to Galliano's own work, this sensibility of clashing together things that weren't necessarily high culture, that were maybe coming from an abject root, and then turning that into something that was, touched up against something that was considered very precious, is very much part of what he did. And maybe he was doing it in an extremely different way from Maison Margiela, but you can see it, that kind of cross-pollination has settled down a bit now, I think.
What's your take on it? Because also, from a print perspective, you must be very enamoured with what he's done and...
Yeah, I remember his collection when he left as a student, all about the French Revolution, which was he attended to every single layer of fabric. He'd done something to it.
Yeah.
So his attention to detail was just phenomenal, really, and he always worked, and his sketchbooks were amazing. So you sort of knew he was good from the start. So I've always followed him. I mean, I was quite shocked that he should be designing for Margiela at first. But yeah, I can see it's getting more Galliano-ish now, which I think is good.
When you say shocked, was it just because of the sensibilities? I understand in terms of a lot of it was based on kind of like personal characteristics, and people talked about how sort of the quietness of Margiela and the complete refusal to engage with the fashion system. Yeah. And when you see someone appointed there who does these fabulous bows at the end of his shows and is very much kind
hair blowing in the wind, the catwalk.
Do you think that was a part of what made that fit seem strange?
Yes, I do, because I remember being in Paris with the students, and I'd never heard of Margiela. We got these crumpled bits of paper, and it was a ticket to Margiela's show. Actually, it just looked like you picked it off the pavement.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very different.
Very different.
John was, John Galliano, big personality, whereas Margiela seemed to hide away.
Yeah.
You went to a show. I remember going to a show because a student was modelling. And she wasn't there, but they had a black show this part of Paris and a white show somewhere else.
Yeah.
It was all a bit secret and mysterious.
It's so hard to do that now, though. I wonder if part of the reason this appointment works is also because the times have changed. We're
completely,
rightly or wrongly, it's so hard to do anything secret. Everything's so obsessively documented. Behind the scenes, getting dressed, behind the scenes at the shoot, behind the scenes at the show, everything. So it's so hard. I don't know if you could be a designer who didn't give interviews or who didn't. I always think
people would be catching it on their mobile.
Yeah, exactly. It would be so impossible.
I know this is probably a terrible thing to say, but what brilliant turnaround for Galliano with a kind of manic showmanship and narcissism. To become like a Trappist monk, and not showing off, and doing fantastic work, in some way I read a very good piece that Claudia Croft did when he went to talk to Shaolin monks about meditation, and this monk said, well, actually, your work is your meditation. Yeah. So he said, well, I realised I've been meditating ever since I was at St Martin's. I thought he should have said. Was meditating during, but anyway, but do you know what I mean? It's like it suits him so well in this time in his life as well, don't you think?
I think so. I think it's it is the perfect job also for him, and there's something quite. I think he couldn't have really gone anywhere else in a way. Actually, that kind of mystery and secrecy protects him, which is brilliant. I'm going to go to you as our Margiela correspondent because, as you said, you're a designer, but you had the amazing experience because you worked there, albeit quite briefly, but during the preparations for the first ever couture show. Just tell me about that.
Well, it was really relaxed. I was really nervous before I went there because Galliano he's the reason why I came to St Martin's, basically. So I was like,
which is strange because we're sitting in St Martin's now having this conversation.
Yeah, it's so weird. Now I'm graduated and I'm just here talking about Galliano, and I work with him. It's quite weird. Yeah. I was really nervous before I went there because I didn't know what I was going to see. I interned before and I didn't have very good experiences. It's a quite weird industry, and I was expecting a really big hierarchy, obviously. Galliano is one of the biggest names in fashion, but then it wasn't how I was expecting it. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything, but it was just really positive. Everyone was really professional and friendly, especially Galliano himself. He was really relaxed with everyone, interns or seamstresses. He would sit down with everyone and just ask how everyone's feeling, and even if he didn't like anyone's work, he wouldn't just say, oh, I don't like it. He would just say, look, maybe you should consider this as well and change it like that, just be really tender and nice to everyone and never go I don't know, never be aggressive or like angry. I don't know. He was really calm and really
Was
friendly.
it quite a spontaneous working environment? Or was the collection very much planned, or was it very much?
It was really spontaneous. I was expecting, because it's Margiela and Galliano, I was expecting super like planned. You know, I thought everything will be like orders and like super professional. But then I think because it was the first collection, and also Galliano himself, he's like into like, I don't know, old vintage stuff. You know, deconstructed. I don't know, just not super organized like an artist, you know. You can't expect an artist to be like, to work in a laboratory, and it wasn't like that. There was like loads of vintage beads everywhere, or like, I don't know, ripped fabrics and stuff. Like there was this table with like loads of vintage buttons and like beads and diamantes, and then they were like, can you just bead this piece to, like a pair of gloves with these materials? I'm like, yeah, that's like my favorite thing to do, just like a bit of junk. And yeah, he just let me do what I wanted to do. He didn't really like came and told me what to do. I was quite free, and I really loved it.
And he's used to having loads of interns. I mean, when he was at Galliano, half of St Martin's was there.
Half of St Martin's was there. That's interesting. What do we think of the kind of it's interesting just comparing what he's doing now to that first collection, because I do think you can see that he had a long break from the industry before he showed that first couture collection. And I think it was Alex who worked out like how many collections he would have designed if he hadn't lost his position at Dior, and it was something crazy. It was like 62 or something. And you think of all those ideas mounting up. And do we think that what he does? What I love about it is it doesn't actually feel that in step with the times. It does feel a little bit different to sort of the spirit of the times, which I think is the benefit of him being slightly out of things. Is it is all these ideas, and it's unmistakably his, and it doesn't look like that thing which you see at other runways where everyone's kind of responding to what everyone else is doing, and there's a real sense of kind of looking over shoulders. But do we feel like it feels contemporary and modern? What's your take, Hettie?
I mean, I don't think there is such a thing as contemporary and modern anymore. I think I think as you talk about this unbelievable acceleration of collections, this idea that he'd have done 62 collections, it's impossible to create something that's contemporary and modern anymore. So I think the most contemporary and modern thing is to have some kind of fresh vision, some kind of fresh ideas.
Yeah. Which he does have.
Yeah. I think it's like Dilara said, I think he's an artist. You know, he really is an artist. So.
And do we worry about the kind of, like as Hettie just said, that the pace of the industry is only getting more punishing, and it does. I think he's got a great setup now, but it worries me for other younger designers to think, actually, how are you going to? Do you feel that kind of going into the industry as a creative person, where you're like, this is just not
because like
workable?
everyone's trying to limit our creativity because no one's buying really creative stuff anymore, and
they're not trying to limit your creativity. You think they are.
I mean, I am not.
And who's they?
Like generally buyers. I mean, I am not limiting.
Buyers. That's a really interesting discussion, isn't it? Because buyers say it's the journalists.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, everyone's doing that thing where they point blame and it goes in a circle.
Yeah, so it's actually really fascinating about that. So I'm really interested to know that you think that, and I'm sure you're right, but I also think it doesn't have to limit your own work.
It doesn't have to do anything with journalists. I don't really look at reviews and stuff like that. It's just, you know, people, when the customer don't want to buy the super amazingly beaded or embroidered, you know, like this crazy dress, then the buyers can't buy that because it doesn't sell. I think it comes to the idea of money, you know, it's all about the money. If it doesn't sell, then no one wants to buy it, and if no one buys your stuff, then you start designing a bit more wearable and simpler stuff. And that what kills creativity. That's what I'm trying to say, you know. I would love to do, I mean, I am still doing, I don't think I'm like trying to limit my creativity, because that is what I'm supporting, you know. I'm like, everyone has to have a different style and try to push their own style and sell that. But then if no one buys it, we can't just like live with no money, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say I was in Antwerp for a symposium a couple of months ago, and I've worked with in Antwerp, you know, on and off for 9-10 years now, and it's the first time I've been in Antwerp and there has been no shop that sells kind of avant-garde clothing. They've all shut down.
Really?
It's absolutely extraordinary. And so, you know, you've got Walter at the top of the fashion academy, and there's nowhere in the city that actually sells Walter's clothes.
Really?
All of the, you know, they had the world's most fabulous stores a few years ago, but it's clearly not been sustainable. And a colleague of mine from Momu, Karen, was over in Japan recently and just says that whole, you know, she was just amazed by everybody dressing in this very conservative kind of monochrome style, and that whole kind of wild Harajuku kind of thing is just really dampened down completely. So there is, I think that, I'm afraid to say, I think there is a bit of a kind of global wave of conservatism, even in those capitals that were seen as being very avant-garde, very open-minded towards wearing maybe more flamboyant or more experimental garb. I mean, you know, maybe that's going to change again in a year, but I was quite shocked, particularly in Antwerp, which has always historically had supported its homegrown designers, even the most, you know, unconventional, I might say.
What's your take on it, Judith?
Well, I've just been reading a thing by an article by the late Sally Brampton about Margiela in '97, December '97.
What's it called?
It's called "Can a Jacket Be Intellectual?"
Oh.
Okay, and it's in Elle, and this is what Sally says regarding Margiela. These are not clothes for everybody. Certainly not for the timid, and are sometimes dismissed as intellectual. This is always offered as a damning indictment. The subtext is that they are unwearable, better suited to hanging on a wall than on a body. But a bit of intellect does us no harm. Without a few mavericks in the sheep pen of contemporary fashion, we're in danger of chasing our own tails round and round the century. Now, so she's talking about people who look back at the past, people who are conventional, people who are scared. She uses the word maverick. That's exactly what Claudia Croft did in the Sunday Times piece, which I was fascinated by, because I would never call Galliano a maverick. Like I wouldn't call Westwood a maverick. I think it's utterly undermining. Because a maverick is essentially a young, usually bullock, who's gone feral and is weak and a nutter. Well, they're not nutters. Do you know what I mean? They're actually very interesting and they have their own vision. I don't think he is a maverick. But the fact that that's used in '97, you know, and now we're talking about how conventional it is, which I completely think it is, and it's very, very depressing.
Yeah, and you were talking about people blaming journalists. I can't imagine that kind of piece being written in Elle these days.
I know.
That's another thing, that nobody's
isn't it
tackling fashion in that way.
Yeah, well, she wrote a brilliant piece in 2005 for the Sunday Telegraph. I mean, and 2,500 words, which my students have to study and we work through as an indictment of the fashion industry, and it's brilliant, blog by blog by blog. And no, I can't imagine that being written now.
But I think this question of intellectual fashion is somewhat at the nub of this as well. I mean, I recently was contributing to a book called Fashion Game Changers, which came out a couple of months ago. And I went through the very early 80s coverage of when the Japanese designers started showing in Paris. And there was this general kind of sensibility among a lot of the writers that essentially if you were wearing the Japanese designers, you probably weren't, you know, getting sex, because you know, this was all for the very kind of uptight people that spent a long time kind of putting their clothes on. And it was kind of anti-sex and you know, and just really, you know, it was like a kind of signal that you weren't putting out, essentially.
But it's also, but that is the fear of the woman with brains, isn't it? Because if you go back to then, yes, yeah, but it was a monk. We're wearing Japanese. Oh yeah, but do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, oh God, it's a blue stocking.
This is among female women's wear daily writers. You know,
oh yeah, I can imagine, absolutely. You know. But isn't that interesting?
But it's still the case that if you look at designers who are dubbed ones who make intellectual fashion, it's often also sort of correlated with being awkward or strange. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. People, I don't know, I think scared to wear, I don't know, if they wear, I don't know, a Dolce & Gabbana dress, which is like super skin tight and sexy and stuff, maybe like an intellectual woman would be scared to wear that, thinking I might not look, you know, showing
serious
skin.
Enough.
Yeah, exactly. It's serious enough. Showing skin is what people are scared of. And also, people who want to look sexy, they're scared to wear like a comme des garçons, you know, oversized coat or something. But then I think there should be a balance between that, you know.
But then do you not think, that's why I'm always fascinated with Miuccia Prada, because I think she's one of the only designers who's seen as an intellectual designer who also makes clothes that are very, very sexual, and they're often quite fetishy, they're often very sexual as pieces, particularly Miu Miu. You know, Miu Miu's quite sick sometimes almost, and it's a little bit, it's very naughty, and I find that really interesting that she's always managed to kind of maintain that intellectual tag. It's very different to someone like Marni, which is seen as intellectual fashion, but it does tend to stand away from the body. It's quite reserved. It's playful, but it's not sexy, and I think that's really interesting. But Galliano does that as well, I guess. In that sense, you think of the woman who wears Galliano as being an intellectual, but also quite free, which maybe is what you don't necessarily think of the.
But I think what we've lost here is the actual feeling of wearing clothes, really good clothes. So, those early Japanese designers, they were fucking amazing to wear. If you could afford it, it felt fantastic, and you looked amazing. You know, and you know, possibly you'd also get laid. You know, whatever.
I think it's see-through. It's very sexy.
I know what I'm saying. But it's like, you know, I forgot what I was going to say now. Sorry, I'm sure it wasn't a pearl of wisdom by any shape or form. But that's what I'm trying to say. You know, let's not forget. You look at Margiela, I should say, Galliano, not from Margiela, and some of those things. I'd really love to wear that.
Yeah.
I would really love to wear it. And I bet it feels amazing.
But does it not come down from expectations from clothing? I do think there's a thing of people maybe not wanting to stand out as much, or thinking that they want to stand out, but what they mean by standing out isn't really standing out, and there's not the same appreciation for sort of construction or interest in surface. I don't know. I think it's interesting to think about. I think about the things that my friends who don't work in fashion would aspire to wear, and they don't tend to be things that are kind of feats of design. They tend to be things that are an interesting brand.
But it has ever been thus. It was ever thus. This is normal. It's just because we're so exposed to fashion on so many levels, and people are told, they sit on the television or here, or you know, on social media, and it all looks fantastically accessible and fabulous and glamorous. It's celebrity fashion. I want a bit of that. They're not going to want to stand out in a crowd. Fashion is no longer, unless you're looking at work by some of the Japanese, or indeed Balenciaga, it's no longer about standing out in the crowd. We think it is, because we of that generation.
It's not people say, I wish I was brave enough to wear that.
I know, it's tragic.
Do people say that to you about sort of like your hair and things like that all the time? Yes. I wish I could do that.
Or I used to do that when I was young, they say that I wish I was brave enough.
Really? That's so funny. What do you say back to them?
Just do it.
Just
wash it out.
Yeah, good. That's interesting.
I think this is also then goes back to where the importance of storytelling comes into things as well, because if nobody is writing in a lyrical and seductive way about clothes that maybe have something going on that's beyond the immediate aesthetic level that you can see on the level of a not particularly high resolution on-screen image, then there's not a kind of seductive reason to want to wear them. And again, there was a woman that we interviewed for the book who only ever wears Margiela, and she's a doctor, and she hadn't been particularly into fashion.
She was your doctor.
She's not been into fashion, but she was really good friends with Bob Verhelst, who I'm sure you know, who's a great scenographer, and he did the scenography for a lot of the Margiela shows and presentations. And he took her backstage once, and she kind of got a sense of the craftsmanship, the narrative, what goes into it, and was completely seduced by the whole thing because she got that insight. And since then has worn nothing but Margiela.
She's still wearing it.
Still.
Galliano Margiela, that's amazing.
She says the only thing she doesn't wear is for work is a piece that's stitched together out of old night dresses because she thinks it's a bit unhygienic. Surgery. But I think it's that you need somebody to pull you across the line to actually understand the narrative, to give it a sense of story, and to give it a sense of, to give a compelling insight, which will then provoke the desire on a level that's just beyond the really raw aesthetic.
Do you not think a lot of it, though, is going to get worse and worse and worse, because also the pressures on young women, I think, to conform and sort of the prevalence of like very sexualized imagery that young women see, it's like never been greater, and like that's, you know, that's beyond fashion, that's like porn culture and what have you. But I don't think you're going to get those same, I can't imagine many young women who will graduate into being that type of woman, because they've just grown up in such a different culture. And I think the imagery that they're bombarded with, it's really in my mind, you see, because I've been rereading Living Dolls, the Natasha Walter book, which is absolutely amazing. But I've been thinking about it a lot and thinking, I can't imagine that those things would even be seen as aspiration. I think the way young women are taught to see themselves is so restricted, but it's also like everywhere, it's so prevalent, and I think I worry that young women won't question that, because there isn't anything around them to make them think that. You know, you open magazines, women's magazines as well as men, and it's such a typical body that you see, and it's so sexualized, and I don't know, I think that it worries me a lot.
But I think it also depends on having a kind of culture of creativity. I was in Moscow last week for the Youth Biennale, and the most interesting fashions I saw looked like they were homemade, in the same way that maybe they would have been in the UK in the 80s. And people were making great outfits and were quite unabashed in what they were wearing. And I think if you have a culture of creativity where people are taught some kind of level of dressmaking in school, where there is a kind of crafting culture, where there's a making culture, you come to appreciate what goes into creating a garment. And the longer that, you know, particularly in secondary schools, any kind of culture of design, art, making is being driven out of the curriculum, the more you're going to go towards quite a simplified culture.
But then does fashion need to take responsibility there to be less inward looking? Because it's all, I think we all presume that, you know, like, how can we do anything, you know, we're the fashion pack and everyone else is, you know, not interested in us weird characters. But then I think about what's happening with food at the moment, and how making food and healthy eating and, like, you know, baking and what have you has become like a real mass thing that people take part in, and you know, it can be, maybe it's Instagram, but it is mass, but not in the sense of actually doing something.
Yeah, because most people are buying ready-made meal. They're watching the food porn, and then they're buying it ready-made. They're not cooking.
Yeah, I spoke to a chef about this recently. I was speaking to Jackson Boxer, and he said exactly that. He said it really worries him, this like how fashionable food has become, because he was like, food has become porn. You watch MasterChef on TV and you don't go into your kitchen and make it. You order a take. But I do still think there is an element of interacting with food that is happening more than interacting with fashion. I think it's kind of, there are a lot of young women who would bake, for example, and or make a smoothie, or follow Deliciously Ella and then rustle up like some fruit
That's
thing.
like a daily life. That's daily life, though. You cook. You have to cook, you know, if you
But
live
then
on
you
your
have
own,
to wear clothes.
You have to wear clothes, but I think most of the young generation want to be a part of fashion because they know they're going to be seen, they're going to get known, you know, they're going to get followers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
selfies.
Selfies and all that. I mean, I'm not saying I don't take selfies, but you know, everyone does. But it's just like
if you took selfies, I'd look at them. It'd be great.
There's lack of interest. Of how the clothes are made. You know, we have high street brands and stuff. It's more about how it looks, because you wear it a few times and they like get destroyed. And it's not important how it's made inside. It's important how it looks.
All Saints, what's its window display? May have to change now, sorry, I shouldn't mention, but old sewing machine. I mean, it's just appalling. So defunct sewing machines, you know, and I agree with you, they should be teaching.
No, it is down to education.
It is absolutely, education is everything. It really is. But Galliano said, you know, fewer and fewer people now can cut and drape, you know. We haven't even reached the sewing machine yet with that statement, and that's really scary.
Nazir said that, actually, Nazir as well, when I interviewed him. He said he gets students, like, even from really good fashion schools, where he was like, they can't do anything.
Yeah, because handwork is getting less valuable because we have machines and all that, and we have computers, so we don't spend enough time on making things with your hands.
It is getting more valuable.
I mean, like, because it's rarer.
Yeah, it's like it's getting more valuable, but not loads of people are doing it. It's like loads of interns or like anyone, fashion students, because there are machines that can do it, embroidery machines, so they don't want to do it with their hands. So there's less people.
Well, they will when they leave, you know, and they can get a job as a machinist or embroidery. I mean, you know, St Martin's used to include the College of Distributive Trades. It was about teaching people to be retailers, work in the industry, etc. And it's not our place, sorry, we're going massively off piece, it's not our place to train technicians, but we damn well should look at that. The fact that people aren't saying, that he is saying, you know, that people are not able to cut or drape.
Everyone wants to be the star, no one wants to work in the background, that's the reason.
We were talking about this in one of the other panels, because it's Couture Week, about, you know, I don't think I've ever spoken to a graduate, and I said this on another panel, who's done design, who wants to go work in an atelier in a couture house and, you know, spend their whole day working on about that much of a dress. It just, you're right, it does feel like it is very much about image and surface and not about the kind of but it's the same as I think it is also the case with students who are studying to be journalists or what have you. They all want to be an editor, they all want to be, you know, there's
I think it's the state of the world right now that we can't really escape from, and I think it's up, like we have to, the younger generation has to do something to change that a little bit, you know, giving more value to the inside of things, you know, the story of it, rather than like the outside, the surface of it. That's what I'm trying to escape from as well, and the fashion world is becoming more and more superficial. But then there's another group, like minority, that is trying to focus on, like, you know, the construction of things and, like, you know, details and stuff, and they're trying to stay away from the other, like, majority. But I think it would be good if that minority would start, like, kind of shoving or like teaching them, I don't know, somehow, so they would blend in and like people would be more knowledgeable about, you know, more intellectual side of things.
We need to start like a making campaign where we try and like teach everyone in the UK to like sew on a button or something. Yeah. Like, do you think as soon as you know how to make something, as soon as you've done it yourself, you appreciate it more?
Yes.
It is like, but then there is a market for it, because things like the sewing bee on TV and stuff, people do like that. So it's just...
Maybe that's sewing porn.
Maybe it's
sewing porn. Sorry, Patrick Grant. I mean, you know, it doesn't get much better.
I do wonder if people watch that and then go and make something. It's true.
I don't think so. They make really complicated things.
Yeah. People like easier stuff though. That's why they go and buy it from like a cheaper brand, because they can buy 10 or like, you know, it's more comfortable and stuff, rather than giving loads of money and like buy.
But it is. I think it's all down to your point, education. I mean, I go to India a lot, and if you see how fabric starts and how it finishes, and all the things it goes through, you can't believe it's not £300 a metre. Nobody knows that, you know, there's a guy grinding the mud to sieve it, and then it's printed, then it's indigo, then it's waxed out. And, you know, before it's made into anything.
Yeah, it's just. I guess it is it's. But then it goes back to what we were saying about too much information. And I think we've also become tired of that kind of making videos. You know, when you see like a behind the scenes like inside, you don't trust it anymore. So it's like, how do you get back? And it goes back to what you said right at the start. How do you get back that authenticity, that sense of actually believing in something and believing in its value? I
do think that's true. I was speaking to because I mean, you know, when they're done in house, you know, it's part of marketing thing. I heard the other day of an editor who is not in this country, it's nobody we know, who came home having seen the Dior documentary with Raf Simons saying, "Ha! Galliano, what did he ever do for Dior? Nothing." Raf Simons, brilliant. That was the response, and that, we all roared with laughter. But the point is, that was very effective. John Galliano does not exist. It's all about this, about somebody's styles. You know, let's not forget that.
It was so weird when Raf Simons came. Everyone suddenly stopped talking about Galliano as if he was never there, and it was all about those minimal dresses that Raf was.
But it's corporate. It was a corporate decision. You know, and that's
I even
industry.
found it strange because there were some collections I felt like when Raf Simons was at Dior where he did reference Galliano's work, like the frock coats and what have you, and was quite open about referencing those, and talked in the show notes and sort of to some journalists about, you know, looking at all aspects of the Dior history. But even that was quite played down, and I don't feel like that became the story of his work there. It was all very much about his aesthetic relationship with Mr. Dior, and it isn't it. But that's the pace of fashion, though, isn't it? Which is that it's always who's there at the moment that you talk about. Like, no one is going to talk about Alexander Wang at Balenciaga. Everyone's just going to talk about Demna at Balenciaga, and then it's just like it's like the biggest example of that is Julian MacDonald for Givenchy. Like, how often do people sit around and talk about that? Like, it's just like erased from history. It is an interesting one, that.
Also, it's like consumerism, you know.
Yeah.
You kind of like use that and throw it away. You know, Julian MacDonald, and now everyone talks about Ricardo Tisci, you know, and it's always going to be like that. But then, like, in, I don't know, 40 years, 50 years, people are going to look at what Julian MacDonald did and going to try to, like, kind of copy it. You know, how we, like, look back and, like,
well,
I look
might
at
actually
Tom
try
Ford.
and evaluate it, which is entirely different from copying it. I mean, I think what's interesting is how people don't talk about, particularly about Jean-Paul Gaultier anymore.
No.
I mean, what a
Gaultier.
major talent. What an incredibly important designer. Hardly mentioned. Sort of fashion's built in obsolescence.
But it's the same with Walter, actually.
Yeah.
If you think about it, like, it was interesting at the Walter show in Paris. I spoke to a couple of Jez who hadn't been for quite a lot of seasons, and then I think because that stopped terrorizing, that stopped terrorizing our world T-shirt kind of when everyone became a bit of a symbol. A lot of people kind of going back, but there's never that many young journalists there. It's never, it's like Walter's fans and friends go, and I mean it's well attended by the press, but it's definitely not. It's always right before Valentino, and you go to Valentino and you see a lot of people at Valentino who didn't go to Walter, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, why would like? It's one of my favourite shows to go to. It's absolutely incredible. But then, when was the last time? And that is maybe where it is the fault of the journalist, just going back to that biased journalist thing, is that obsession with the new. You know, this is the cool young thing you need to know about. These designers are like, you know, upturning X with this. You know, they're revolutionising our system. All those stupid, like, dazed headlines that you read all the time that are completely meaningless. Yeah. And then there's an amazing person like Walter, and it's like you don't really... Like, I can't remember the last time I saw an amazing feature about Walter and talking about how innovative he still is. Yeah, he's not 19, it doesn't matter.
Actually, there was a very good, I'm just going to put you up and there was a very good Dazed.
Was there? Oh God, I was doubting my words.
But it was a conversation between him and Craig Green talking about the incredible influence he has on him.
I did actually see that was amazing, because Craig used to work for him, which is amazing.
Well, Craig did his year out with him. He was a Prince student,
Yeah. Because I think Demna worked with him as well, didn't he? Maybe was it just through the academy?
I don't know that. I know Demna was at Margiela and he was at Louis Vuitton. I don't know if he was at Walter.
That much.
I mean, you can't pass Gianto without having quite a lot of Walter influence.
Yeah. I just love him.
I love Walter. I'm a big fan as well.
Let's give Walter a little shout out. Shall we have a look at John Galliano's collection? Because I feel like we've got so much to talk about. We really like putting the world to rights, but maybe we should have a look. We have got the show notes, so we kind of talked briefly about them. A lot of what it's focusing on is this idea of aristocracy, but also like an urban sensibility, which is obviously kind of very Galliano, as we've already discussed. The first look is, I'm going to just read it out, an upside-down cabin in bonded orange Macintosh fabric worn over a navy waxed cotton shift dress and black thigh-high rubber-soled tabby boots.
I mean, I'd say looking at that, when he talks about aristocracy, he's talking about 18th century French aristocracy rather than...
Well, he's actually looking at the incroyable. That's what he's looking at, post-aristocracy French, because with that collar and that shape, so it's really interesting.
It's really super exaggerated.
And that's a great love of his. I mean, I came just looking at this as Maison Margiela, I think it was in '93, did a chemise à la reine. He did chemise à la reine for his degree shirts at Martin's, and the white transparent. You can put Vigée Lebrun's painting of Marie Antoinette there. I mean, there is really crossover similar. This is which I think is fascinating. But yes, he might think it's aristocratic, but it's more swashbuckling, isn't it? I mean, it's beautiful.
Just for the sake of our viewers, just to talk about this incroyable, because I think what they do is very interesting, because this idea, it is using clothes to kind of shock or subvert or make a political statement by wearing things that are almost like comically oversized or in certain aspects undersized, and I think it's interesting to talk about historical costume in the context of something that can be quite punkish and quite subversive, which is obviously what you're seeing here with, and I find it funny to see the really long sleeves when we've got that whole kind of Vetements fever at the moment for like a long sleeve.
I love those long sleeves.
Yeah. But it is quite swashbuckling, all right. It's quite.
But the long sleeves then also relate into Central Asian and Far Eastern dress as well, with the idea of having these layered long sleeves, so you weren't working with your hands.
Yeah. second look is a coloured contour chandelier crystal bra is layered over a printed bra, and worn with a white silk Findikoglu jacquard dress with a striped tulip motif worn with trekking-inspired sandals and socks.
Yeah, that dress seems to... It looks a bit like his bias cut dresses.
Yeah, very much like his dresses, yeah.
It's far more Galliano, isn't it?
Yeah,
Very
it is
Galliano.
quite Galliano.
But then what I love is, you know how we talk about things being sexy, and I love the makeup because it looks like she's just been snogged for absolutely ages, and it's like all over her face. But that is much more sensual, and...
Yeah, I like that he's like taking a different step from the Pat McGrath, like, you know, super perfect makeup, you know. Yeah. Now it's like all smudged.
Is Inge Gronyard still doing the makeup for Margiela now?
I think Pat is doing it. When I was there, Pat was doing it. I think she's still doing it.
I think she. I'm pretty
Pat
sure she.
Yeah,
does
I think
it.
Pat, because
she's
good friends with him.
Yeah.
I love that coat from the back. That back view.
Oh, that's amazing. So it's two
Yeah,
coats
it's
upside down
amazing.
with the sleeves united almost then.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
What I love is like each. I always think what we know Galliano for is very much having a story to a collection. And when you think of his dual collections, it's like, you know, Madame Butterfly or you know, the circus and what have you. It's very much like it's about one woman. It's like she does this, she loses her slipper, she finds an umbrella, she walks down here. You know, it's about a story. But what I feel like with these Margiela collections, I think they are also, there is this narrative in this story, but it also feels like it's completely different women in every single look, which is, to me, quite different to how the Dior Spirit felt, where it was very much like, it was one woman and all the models became that woman, they were all relatively similar, whereas this is just like...
They're all different.
Yeah, number 2 is so different to number 3, and I like that, and it feels very...
Yeah, it all makes one story when they come together, but it's good that he's portraying like different women.
Number 3 is a scissor back overcoat in navy wool with a green quilted underjacket worn over a wind cheater in checked nylon. It is worn with dark green waders and a tricorn hat by Stephen Jones.
Oh.
I like it because it doesn't look like what Galliano would normally make, and it looks.
Do you think
kind
that's?
of
I think that looks
sporty.
so Galliano.
Really,
Yeah.
I find it a bit more like sporty and like just one color. You know, the next look, the red one, is more Galliano to me because it's showing the waistline, you know, and the drapery and stuff.
But that the three-cornered hat is pure John Galliano, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it goes straight back to his degree collection.
Oh, sorry, I was
doesn't
talking
it?
about the fourth one.
Oh, right. Yeah.
What I like about
I see.
Yeah, sorry.
You're right. No, you're
Yeah,
right about that
the
one.
fourth one.
No, I agree.
the fourth one is a padded dress in black, silk georgette, one with thigh-high black rubber sole, tabby boot. Yeah, you're right, number 5 does feel more...
Really Galliano, like with the waist, you know. It's showing a bit of the breasts as well.
But that's interesting, number 4. Look at the silhouette. I mean, that's to make the silhouette as wide as he possibly can, as horizontal. I mean, that's a really interesting idea.
Is that padded or not? I can't.
Number 4 is, it's padded, yeah. Do we like what we're seeing?
Yeah, I think, but it's very theatrical. I mean, these look
Yeah.
like theatre costumes.
I like
almost
the blue
all
one
mature.
coming up.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's
It's
that.
really-
Yeah, that's
So
the-
that is a Harris tweed wool coat. This one with a bustier dress with a hand-painted cobalt blue lining is one with black leather clogs and a hat.
Where's the overcoat?
Yeah, I didn't know.
I think
feel
tied
like
around
maybe it's
the-
tied
Is it?
round.
Itchy.
Harris tweed.
Yeah. I want to know what it says.
Something like
It
Revolution.
looks like it says Revolu.
Yeah, like
Revolution.
Revolu.
Revolu.
Yeah, I can see Revo and
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a T, there's an L.
You can see that red dress from the back. It's very much taken from a man's coat as well. That shoulder profile, like a man's riding jacket, actually, a riding coat, I'd say.
Number 7 is a white pleated silk mousseline crepe dress with draped motocross leather sleeves, worn with trekking-inspired sandals and socks. I love number 7. I just think that's so beautiful.
it is quite new for what he used to do, I think.
I think it's completely him. I don't think
Really?
it's new at all.
Really?
No,
Why do you think?
With that.
Well, because it's a mousseline dress,
Mm.
but he's cleverer than we think.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, it's
know,
sporty
do you know,
boots.
because it
Yeah.
does go back to Margiela, the references are there.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
if he
students
wants,
are quite-
if he's wanting to make those references
Yeah.
and feels secure or that it's important, he is ticking boxes
Yeah.
here. You know, I mean, do you like the white dress?
Not particularly.
Okay, you don't like it.
I wouldn't wear it, but
Okay,
it might look good on a
interesting,
taller person.
What's funny is that we've seen a lot of this Empire line all the way through the couture collections.
Yeah.
And which is a return to this kind of purity.
It's that modesty thing.
And it's kind of funny
away.
that it's in a time of total crisis and panicky fright, it seems to be very appealing.
But it wasn't about modesty.
But it's
Neoclassical dress
It's naturalism.
It certainly wasn't about modesty. So I'm interested in that. You're absolutely right about the neoclassicism, and if that line is coming back, but simply because of the politics where we are. And I think it's what's really interesting, seeing if this is reflected in his work.
It's a time where we need transparency.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
8 is a marabou trimmed baby doll dress, but then it's got that blanket stitched coat over it. But I kind of love that. It's kind of something that is quite, and that's quite him, something that is quite sort of almost a little bit bad taste and costumey, but then...
It's funny because we associate baby doll dresses with slightly dodgy kind of 1970s movies, but of course it's a Balenciaga silhouette.
Yeah.
Not done with marabou trim, mind you, in baby blue. But that's so funny with the socks and sandals. That really shows the socks and sandals.
We associate that look with the project we do for Grace.
Oh my God, it is like
that is Grace and Pose.
Yeah, their socks and everything.
It's quite fabulous. Number 9 is a wind cheetah dress in silver Japanese nylon, worn with a corset, again very Galliano, in Toile cotton.
I like how he still uses corsets.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, mixing it with more like futuristic stuff. I would love to still be wearing corsets in like 50 years.
Fallen from
I love that.
But all of these nylon wind cheaters and things, I mean, it's so, I guess, 90s. It's quite...
But I think it is
quite
also that sporty sensibility. I think if you're a designer at the moment, you couldn't help but think of sporty clothing. It's just everywhere. And I think
you can't escape from that, unfortunately.
But it's interesting to see the nylon and then the Harris tweed, like kind of like, you know, from one look to the next, they're completely there.
So what's the description for this?
For 11 is a draped wool dress in Harris tweed embroidered with feathers and
that was like kind of plastic raffia.
10 is an anorak in red Japanese nylon, worn with a hand smocked transparent plastic over top and a studded white patent leather T-bar shoe.
Yes, I really love that.
Yeah, I like that.
That's really fun.
I do love that. That's fun. And it's just his bias cut tweed that he's been working on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wool dress in Harris tweed embroidered with feathers and studded motif. 12 is an upside-down coat in albino felted yak hair with inside-out cotton thread embroidery. It is worn with a navy wool cable knit sweater worn under an albino felted skirt worn with black rubber Wellington V. It's kind of amazing. Imagine if you started reading a book and
fantastic.
That was how the character's outfit was described. Imagine if it was like Georgia was wearing an upside-down coat. You'd be like, this is an amazing book. Amazing.
Do you think they actually had to find albino yaks to make that coat?
Yeah.
There is some woman going around, a yak person, promoting
a yak person?
They came here, yes.
Oh.
I can't remember.
Number 13, Trompe l'oeil cabin in dark blue wool is worn over a striped silk sweater and a checked Harris tweed gold skirt with celluloid bird sequins, which is worn with an how do you pronounce it? That's it. Hat and brown leather clogs.
Is that see-through?
A beekeeper's
dress?
hat.
A beekeeper's hat, which is I take as a comment on policy that's going to kill the bees, because bees are under threat at the moment. So Michelle Lamy has bees on her roof.
Well, apparently it's not very good for bees to be on the roof because they get tired.
No.
They're on the roof of Fortnum's.
Yeah, well, they get very tired flying all the way up, and it exhausting. They can't make honey and pollen.
We can't make honey and I just imagine if you were getting married and you wore that as your veil as you're going down the aisle.
Look again. You were talking about the width of the silhouette a few ago. Look at the skirting on that yak coat from the back. Though that's amazing. That's really heavy.
That's beautiful.
But this sorry to go back to the apiarist, this is pure English eccentricity. I'm sure there's a picture of Diana Cooper, or, you know, these dotty old ladies, you know, basically wearing them. I mean, that's pure about whimsy. I mean, if that's Stephen Jones, that's about whimsy. It's not about being a worker, in my opinion.
No.
And what I know of them. And, and that's fascinating, isn't it? Didn't McQueen do Sarah... what's her name? Did it for McQueen? Yeah,
she did a bee collection,
Yeah.
It was more honeycomby text.
Yes, it was.
14 is an oversized tailored jacket in khaki Harris Tweed, worn with a cotton corset and a brown leather belt.
Yeah, that's quite Galliano.
That's more like Dior-y Galliano.
Yeah,
like
new look.
Yeah.
That looks like Kendall Jenner party dress to me.
But then I also think you can imagine if you were a couture client and someone who wanted to buy Galliano, so you know, beautiful, beautiful jacket. You understand why that's included.
Oh yes, it's commercial.
Yeah, that's
a seller.
Yeah,
it's a seller.
Whereas I think that silk stripy sweater as well is that's quite a...
16 is so good. It makes me think of like his graduate collection. Like it's kind of, I love that. 15.
Yes, it's heroic.
It's so heroic.
I think with all the waders and the beekeeping hats as well, it's when he talks about aristocracy and the urban real, it's maybe bringing aspects of kind of country life and a kind of, as you say, whimsical notion of, you know, waders and...
I also think it's always about like why we wear things, when we wear them, and where we wear them, and it's very much about like impossible situations and things being worn in the wrong contexts and I think that's always something that's there, and that is something that is quite aristocratic if you think about it. You know, if you tend to think of very, very aristocratic people, they tend to be the scruffiest and they tend to be wearing the most inappropriate things and things that shouldn't be worn, but they're wearing them to a certain occasion, and that is a very British kind of sensibility. Which is interesting to see.
You've only got to go to Glyndebourne, haven't you?
Yeah.
Glyndebourne.
Yes.
Then that's quite interesting. We've seen a lot of that hot yellow, and then suddenly you get it in the kind of oilskin jacket, and that link back to kind of all weather gear kind of becomes a bit more apparent as well.
17, it says it's embroidered with a black encrusted lace cherub motif, but it's hard to see.
Where is it?
Do we have any close-ups? We can go to after. We can have a look at some close-ups afterwards.
Maybe from the back. Well, the
18's got it, so it must be on the back of the coat, because 18 is the same motif, the cherub motif.
You can see she's carrying, I don't know whether that's the coat or maybe that's a train. Maybe that's an enormous train coming off the back that she's carrying.
Yeah, look.
Yeah, it is a train, because it doesn't say that she's carrying a bag or anything.
Yeah.
Wonderful colours. Look at that blue, yellow and red.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I love number 18. That's so Galliano. It's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah, 18 is my favourite.
Oh wow, number 19. A Harris Tweed and velvet jacket with long knitted sleeves and tulle detailing.
Kate Moss wants her dress back.
A green knotted net dress.
It's actually a wedding.
It is actually, oh my god, isn't it? But I love like this kind of eccentricity, because it doesn't feel like there's that many designs. There's so much minimalism at the moment, and it's nice to see things that like I think Gucci has brought, like Alessandro Michele at Gucci has brought back in a kind of spirit of things being cluttered and maximalist and a kind of magpie sensibility. But this is a kind of very different form of eccentricity, and it's really nice to see.
It's very sophisticated.
Yeah.
Look at that fantastic back shot. The red print. So sexy, isn't it?
But then the feeling that the dress is half finished and falling off is very Margiela.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like a mixture of sexiness and intellectuality, you know. Not like a really particularly sexy woman wear it. You have to have that sort of, you know, vibe.
I love the sheer dress number 19 because it's so sexy, and then it just says worn with hand painted clogs.
But it also looks like she's got those, you know, those mittens you used to have at school that was so
when you were
like,
a child.
like that had elastic on them that used to dangle down from the ends of the sleeves.
But he's working cuffs, isn't he? He's working the lower arm. He did it in the last season when he did these fantastic, they look like Peruvian knitted socks that were muffs. It was really clever. This one I love, number 20.
Yeah, number 20, an upside-down jacket in grey tweed, worn with a lavender silk frock coat tied at the waist over a brushed silk sweater, is worn with hand-painted clogs. So it's all very much about how things are worn, that one, as well as how they're constructed.
And
like
he was doing upside-down jackets when he was a student.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at that from the back.
Yeah. Him and John Flett, they were always trying on each other's
look at that.
things.
Really?
Yeah.
And just turning them, that's interesting.
It's a completely different outfit seen from the back.
Seen from the back, yeah.
It's extraordinary.
21 is a jacket in lemon wool, pieced with a ruffled dress in floral, embroidered technical silk. It's worn with hand-painted clogs.
I mean, these are technically extremely sophisticated pieces. They're
Yeah, it's absolutely
really
amazing.
interestingly conceived, interestingly put together.
But it is interesting to see, like, this collection is 26 looks long, and it's interesting to see it in the context of a couture week where, you know, the Chanel collection was what, like 69, 70 something looks, and actually this feels really like, you know, we're talking about like works of art, but it feels like you imagine each of these pieces being worked on in the studio almost like these kind of separate amazing ideas, and it doesn't feel like a collection, like, you know, that's trotted out loads and loads of looks. It feels very, very special.
Yeah,
and
each look
piece
is strong on its own.
Yeah.
And I have a real pet peeve about this kind of very flat front-on tendency where things are very much, you know, you only ever see the kind of front side of a garment, and it feels very two-dimensional in conception quite often because that's the way people see and buy fashion now. And these are really conceived in 3 dimensions, as we've said. You know, they look so different in reverse.
Yeah.
And I imagine from the side they'll present something quite exciting.
Well,
as well.
that is what I was going to say, because number 22 is very exciting because it features a print of Nick-Night British Birds, which is a 2008 photograph, and you can see it. It's like snaking around the side, and it looks absolutely amazing.
Does that mean you get to wear it for the next panel then?
Well, you know, I'd like to. I'm going to put in, you know, maybe a request.
Full rank.
But yeah, it's so exciting.
Can we see the photo as well?
Yeah, so that's the photograph.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Which is it's from 2008, and it is one of like Nick's sort of very loved photographs.
Clever.
And yeah, so, and obviously he has such a special relationship with John Galliano because he shot all of the Dior campaigns for such a long time, like 10 years, so they have a really close relationship. So yeah, it's very, very nice. I know that Nick's very excited. It's interesting because it was like last season, Judd Takashi from Undercover printed the Dripping Roses on clothing, so it is like there's a bit of a Nick Knight printed on. Yeah, that's the Undercover stuff, the Dripping Roses. So
Beautiful.
yeah, very nice. Look 23 is a dress embroidered with pale green vacuum foam formed plastic. It's kind of amazing. But that's very Margiela as well, like plastic.
He's been working with cling film and plastic for a few seasons now. I think. Yeah. He used it in little details before, like kind of plastic bags, I think in MM6.
Yeah.
And now it's nice.
We had a student doing that for this press show. Who was it, man? Can you remember?
No.
The girl who did the Waitrose bags.
Oh yes.
The gown.
And loads of
Wonderful.
transparency, wasn't there?
Yeah.
This year.
24's also got British Birds on it. You can actually see it a bit more
fantastic.
clearly there, like especially from the back. It's kind of amazing.
Head stuff's quite good, isn't it? I mean, that lovely little
Yeah.
Apollo wig is lovely.
24.
Stephen Jones.
25 is a black silk satin frock coat worn with a cream man's wool tuxedo trouser and black leather boots. And then 26 is the last look, a panelled wind cheater draped dress in colour blocked ripstop is worn with dark green waders.
The last, that colourful piece looks like a flag to me, like with all the
There is that kind of like fighting spirit.
yeah, like
definitely.
revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is feisty.
But there's great movement in this collection.
Yeah.
If you look at it, I mean, it is all about movement, isn't it? You know, and it's...
Well, the clothes look like they're moving about the body constantly.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like,
You know, there's activity.
Yeah. We're talking about draping, and it almost looks like they're in movement. Like particularly 24, that looks like he's in the middle of positioning it. You know, it doesn't particularly look like it's. Should we have a look at some of the close-ups so you can see stuff?
Yes,
a bit
that would be
more?
smashing.
Yeah,
Oh, I love
she
those
is
bright
with her.
tulips. I couldn't see them before. Oh God, isn't that great? That makeup.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the second look is so good, that embroidery.
Beautiful. Oh, it's checked.
Yeah.
Wow.
Check green wind cheater.
Wow. How interesting.
And that is, you were talking about muffs earlier, and the next one is a muff on the front.
Oh yeah, look, see, I'm so blind. Fabulous.
It's hard
Muff
to see.
fever. He's really going for it. And I like that now. I can see it close. I love the top of it. I love those exaggerated gigot puffed shoulders. And also the plastic. Where's the plastic headscarf from? Because
Christopher Kane did them
exactly.
as well,
But where's it from? I mean, I'm not trying to say Christopher didn't invent it, if he did, or play with it, but it's quite an interesting idea, isn't it?
Stephen did it for Christopher as well, so maybe it's something that's on Stephen's mind.
But there was I remember there was quite an interesting shoot, I think, in the face, which was like a Princess Anne tribute, I think, in the 90s.
Oh really? Maybe they were looking at that.
Headscarfy.
But people put those on in the rain, don't they?
Yeah.
Yes, so they're very old lady, aren't they?
Yeah.
You know, very 1960s.
But then that's very Galliano. One thing I love about his work at Margiela is it's really interesting in the approach to age. Like, it does feel like it's like young woman right through. It's like, is it a granny's clothing? Is it a child's clothing? You know, and that's really interesting. That's also really Alessandro Michele as well. I want that beekeeper's hat.
The green one or the yellow one?
The green one.
We can get you one and just dye it.
Perfect. My look for next season.
But that's quite an interesting one as well, because it's conical. It then also connects to a kind of medieval headpiece as well.
Yeah.
Because it's got a little round thing on top.
Are there any shots of the back? Should we zoom through them a bit? See, I want to see more. Yeah, even from the side, that is amazing.
That smocky is wonderful. That is so beautiful. That the over garment in plastic is beautiful.
What I can't see from these photographs is how much that element of kind of ready-made, handwork ready-made materials there is going into this as well. I mean, possibly the red sleeves on.
So do we like what we've seen? Are we impressed? Moved, inspired?
I think we're quite excited. Actually.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting development, actually.
Are the students
well
as
done.
excited by him as they ever were? It was interesting that you said you came to St Martin's because you'd read about him going there, and like you speak to so many journalists and designers and they say that, but do you think today's students, are they as aware of his work and as excited by him?
I think CSM students,
they're
all really excited.
I mean, you say you can't have secrets. We secretly had him here for a crit.
Did you?
And the students were,
Wow.
They were so thrilled.
Women's Wear had a...
Yeah.
Do they still have it, that project?
That's amazing.
No, I think
project?
that was just a one-off.
Oh, yeah, that
And
is really special.
He was so nice.
Can you imagine if you just walked in to teach you one day? It is amazing. Have we got, there a video, we can see it in movement, that's nice.
Yeah, I think the theatricality feels incredibly Galliano, but I think the technical, conceptual aspect of it feels very Margiela.
I love that dress. I think that's
So happy marriage.
Yeah, and you've got the dress for it, and probably the man's suit as well.
Should we give him a round of applause?
Yes.
Very good.